It's hard to talk about Mentor Me without giving a little bit of history. If you wind the clock back, I don't know, 15 years ago, I used to go down to the Societies of Photographers offices once a week, and I'd sit with the CEO, Phil Jones, and together we'd go through the Mentor Me reports that we had in. Now that was basically a totally paper-based system, and I often said to Phil, oh, wouldn't this be great if we could get a little bit more hands-on? And that's where Mentor Me on Steroids actually came from. I wanted to do something a little bit hands-on. Phil gave me the blessing and off we went. And initially the first two groups, it was a trial. We did them for free at first, and then we realised that because it wasn't costing anything, people weren't putting the time and the effort in. Having said that, in the 13 years it's been running, Mentor Me's only had a price increase twice, because for us it was never ever about being a complete standalone business. It was as a fellow giving something back to the industry, and as I say, we found out that we needed to charge for that, because unless there's a slight pain threshold in it, people don't put the time and the effort in, and that's where the fee structure came from. Very quickly we had successes. Our first Master Photographer of the Year, our first Photographer of the Year title, went to a lovely gentleman called Stuart Walker, who won Society's Pet Photographer of the Year. And from there, in the last 13 years, we've managed to help 47 people achieve Photographer of the Year status. And that's within the societies, the MPA, the Guild, the BIPP. When it comes to winning awards, we'll go anywhere to help people to win awards. But that's only one part of the business of photography. The real business is making sure that you have a solid core foundation in how you operate, in your systems and your processes, both photographically and both in business. And this is something that's massively lacking in our industry. Now, I'm genuinely not sitting here saying I have all the answers. What I do have is 35 years of experience, and I have worked through now with this pandemic 4 major financial downturns and crashes, and I haven't been right all the time, and I haven't had the right answers 100% of the time. But what I have had is enough smarts and enough drive and enough acumen to make sure that we've managed to move forward and get past these issues, just as many of our mentees have. The one ingredient I can't give you though is effort. I can moan, which I don't often do, because I believe we all have an Olympic gold medalist or a Paralympic gold medalist within us. So why don't we all achieve? And the answer to me is very, very simple. We don't all achieve because not many of us are prepared to run through the sleet and the snow at 5:30 in the morning in December and do the things that are necessary to be a winner. We can give you all the information and we give you everything else, and hopefully we give you the motivation too. But you have to put that last little bit of ingredient in. I will forever tell you, you only reap what you sow. You have to put the effort in. But Mentor Me is a way of shortening that learning curve. The big issue that we've always had is Mentor Me on Steroids is finite. There are only enough hours in the day, only enough days in the week, only one me and only one team. So we've never been able to get the trick of being everywhere all at once. And then the pandemic hit us, and we realised that by using technology more, by being brave enough to be on camera, I know I have a face for radio, but I can't help it. We've been able to share our knowledge throughout the pandemic and keep the Mentor Me team going and keep people motivated and keep them working and keep them moving forward. Many of you may have seen the Photography Without Frontiers initiative that we also decided to do, and we very, very quickly raised over £5,000 for NHS charities together, and we put 100 photographers together to up and down the country to sort of bring work in for them and take pictures for people. And again, it proved to us that digitally there's a better platform for us to reach out and help and educate, and that's really all we want to do on our mentoring program. We want to give you, not like a franchise where you have to follow what we do. We want to give you the understanding and the knowledge of why we do things. That way you still keep your own personal style. You do the things that you want to do. You can be a baby photographer, you can shoot boudoir, you can shoot families, you can shoot cars, you can be commercial. You can do anything you want. In my 35 years, there's very little that I've not shot professionally. Because back when I started, we didn't have this sort of genre segregation that we have now. To survive in business, you had to shoot weddings at the weekends, bit of light commercial work Wednesdays and Thursdays, portraits on a Friday, Saturday if you didn't have weddings. You know, we did everything, and that's the advantage that we've had in the ability to be able to help people and guide people. So the structure of what we do on Mentor Me is split into 3 sections. The first part of the day is what we call round the table, and that's where we find out how you're doing, what's going on in your businesses, in your lives, so we're aware of where you're starting from. Then we teach a business principle or a marketing principle or something basically that will enable you to build your business forward. We're very keen on numbers here, because numbers are super important. Now, despite my mum being a maths teacher, I'm not a big fan of numbers, so I like easy, simple things. I want stuff that I can understand on one page and make a decision from there. But if you're avoiding numbers altogether, then you're never going to survive in business, because it is about your return on investment and your numbers. You know, in very simple terms, you know, if you spend £1 to earn £1, then you're just going to be a busy fool. If you spend £1 to earn 99 pence, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. If you spend £1 to earn £1 and a penny, then you'll ultimately get there. And it's understanding how the mechanics of business work, why you need to know your cost per customer, why you need to know what your margins are, what you need to do to get a return on investment. And we make these processes really simple to understand. That's super important. The one thing that we do to try and drill into you is that you're not in the photography business. If that's your mindset, most people will go bust. You have to switch that round. You are in business and your product is photography. And it's only a minor tweak in the wording, but a huge leap in the way that we process things. So in short, what we're trying to do is pass on the things that we've learned, mainly from making the mistakes and now knowing not what to do, to help you to propel yourself forward. Could you do it by yourself? Yes, of course you could, with an awful lot of book learning, an awful lot of reading, an awful lot of research, an awful lot of internet chasing. And what Mentor Me does is it brings everything together in one place, and it enables you to trim the time off that it would normally take to be successful. In my own career, I said nothing for the first 10 years. I think it took me 15 years to win my first award, and then by 25 years I'd become an overnight success. What MMOS does is it cuts that learning curve. It cuts a good 10 or 15 years out of what you're doing. One of our biggest successes was a very highly motivated young lady that came to us on a Baby Whisperer Academy weekend, and then did the one thing that we say not to, and gave up her job and wanted to open her own studio, having never been a studio owner previously, or indeed run her own business. And you know, maybe because she'd gone against what I said to do, I felt a bit guilty and we tried a little bit harder, or we gave more information quicker because she was able to absorb it. And in the first 10 months of being in business, she turned over £78,000. In a second year of business, her husband gave up his job and came to work in the studio. 3 years on, and they're batting work away. I've had the privilege of mentoring people like Tracy Willis and Karen Wiltshire and Jocelyn Conway from the newborn market side. In fact, My very first Master Photographer of the Year winning picture was of what was then technically known as a sleeping baby. But that baby is now 27 years old, so again it proves that newborn photography isn't a new genre. It's something that we were doing as a matter of course back in the day, because we had to do everything to have a business that sustained us. So round the table is dead important to us. It's where we set you up for your success, and that's all we're interested in Meant to Me is your success. The next step of the day is getting into the camera room and learning something, whether it's about the inverse square law or the properties of a modifier or a full-blown shoot, or if we're out on location or shooting outside or balancing flash with available light. I will teach you everything that I did to get my lighting standards to the way that they are. For you, I believe it's important to know how to master and manipulate light. Then you can decide how much you need to master and manipulate and what you point it at. One of the real big advantages of being mentored in our stable is the fact for nearly 16, 17 years now, I've been an internationally accredited print judge. I've judged all over Europe. I've judged Australian competitions. Sweden been one of my favourite places to judge in. Swedish photographers are so enthusiastic, it's really refreshing sometimes. But anybody that's been on Meant to Me for 2 or 3 years will tell you that the most valuable part of the day for them is the critique section. And again, we've managed to improve what we do through digital media, because we now do the critique sessions with the images on an iPad, and we use a little piece of software that enables me to note the pictures, sketch on the pictures, crop the pictures, add my experience as a print judge to help people finesse, develop and grow their work, and that's really exciting to me. We've even started running internal photographic competitions, and that's been exciting to our members, because not only are the prizes up for grabs, but that's the real way to learn and develop your work. So that's one of the bits that I love, and that's how we've always traditionally rounded off the Meant to Me in Steroids Day. Going virtual has allowed us to split what we do into different levels and different stages. We've got 3 of them. So if you just want to dip your toe in the water and see how things go, you're more than welcome to do that. To the full-blown business support package, to even, when we have the occasional place available to Meant to Me on Steroids itself in person. But having that facility for you to choose your level of learning enables you to decide how much time you've got to put into it, how much effort you've got to put into it, and what your resources are. It just enables us to again be more inclusive and allow more people to enjoy, benefit and prosper from photography the way that I want everybody to do. MMOS isn't perfect. As much as we love it, and as much as it's had all these successes, and as much as it will continue and go from strength to strength, the big issue is you have to come here to me. Now that requires extra time in travelling, extra cost in travelling, cost of accommodation if you're staying over, etc. And we do literally have people from all over the place coming to Meant to Me. Some very brave people, brave maybe not the right word, people that wanted to invest seriously in their progression and their education. The furthest we've had people come is from the east coast of Italy. So the drawback of Meant to Me was the fact that you always had to come here, and we didn't have enough time or enough facility to be able to facilitate everybody that wanted to be part of it. And let's be honest, if travelling quadruples your cost of being involved, that's something to really think about. The silver lining in the COVID-19 pandemic is it just showed us how much that we could do virtually, and how much we could reach out to people and how we could help people in Sweden and Norway and Denmark and the States, and get everybody involved that wants to be involved. And that's why we're turning a lot of what we do over to a new virtual education system, so it can be as inclusive as possible for anybody wherever you are. You can study in your own time, you can do the things at your own pace, and ultimately you will get where you want to go with our guidance and our help, but you're not restricted by your physical location in the world. And that's a really important development for us, because it just means that we can reach out more, we can grow more, we can help more people achieve the goals that they want to. And as Mentor Me is very focused on helping you become the best you can be, then that becomes really important to us, and it becomes attractive to us and something that we want to do to help the industry strengthen, to help the industry grow, to help the industry be more professional, more able to cope with the changes that the world's throwing at us. So that's why we're now opening a new virtual side to our training. What we don't do on Mentor Me is try and fit square pegs into round holes. If you're a square peg, we'll chip out a square hole for you, because we want you to be happy in your environment. What I said before about everybody having that potential of winning a gold medal is true, but I can't expect you to work really hard for my dream for you. It has to be your dream, and that's why we're going to give you a link in this to the very first thing that we talk about round the table together on Mentor Me, which is where you want to go. And this is super important, because you have to put your goals, dreams and ambitions down on paper. You need to have a timeline of, well, I'd like to visit America in 3 years' time, or whatever your dreams and ambitions are, because once we solidify them on paper, then you can sit down and design the things that you want. And once we know what you want, we can then help you achieve them. So look out for the little download link. Take this as a little gift from us. Give yourself a good half an hour, sit down, have a think about it. And I tend to do it backwards. So where do I want to be in 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year? That's an easier thing to do, because if you're a bit like me, it's easier to sort of dream a bit more long term and then realistically put things down as you get nearer to you having to complete them. That's really, really important. So take the time to decide how you want to live your life, because that's the bottom line. It's your life, and if you want to do it through photography, we'll do our very best to help you. Right, so here we are on the next phase, or the next piece within a standard MMOS day. And this is my happy place. This is where I like to be. I like to be making and creating pictures and passing the knowledge on of how it's done. Now, the practical side of what we do could be a full-blown shoot. It could be looking at an aspect of a modifier's qualities and properties. It could be the inverse square law. It could be ratios. It could be all the necessary components to turn you from a picture taker into a picture maker. And what we're going to look at now in the studio is the, well, now slightly famously almost patented Damian McGillicuddy Lego brick method of lighting. This is the way I like to teach and get across how I light. It's building each light up incrementally, bit by bit, piece by piece. Because even me as a double-barred grandmaster, if I've set 15 lights up and something is wrong, it's hard to go backwards and chase it back to find the problem. If I'm building and okaying each light as it goes on incrementally, then I can see if there's any issues at the point of having that light there. And then what I need to do is then correct that light before I can go on. But if I go on that way, then I know when I come to the end of my lighting rig, everything is successful. So maybe this is probably the exciting bit when we do mentoring and we do mentor me. So let's really delve into what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do, and I say this with every photographer, what are you trying to say? What do you want people to feel and emote when they see your picture? That's the place we should all be starting. Now I'm going to shoot a stylized image of Lily, which is second in a progression of 3 images, a triptych, for our futuristic nun, a sort of religious iconic image for the future. And this, we've already done the white angelic. This is where we're transitioning from pure good on the white side, if you like, all the way we'll end up with having our darker character. So this is a transition period picture. So I need it to blend with the original and tell the story of it going to its next partner image in the triptych. So what we'll do is we'll flash up the original image now. So you can see that it's all very white and angelic. And what I want to do, because the whole point of here and the whole point of how we train and how we teach is I will never ask you to believe anything. I will always show you. And I know even in this picture, there'll be things that you think are done in a certain way because you've read the book, bought the DVD, seen it on YouTube, or attended the seminar, which I can physically prove to you the information is wrong. And I'll show you the right way. And that's how we've managed to produce 47 photographers of the year in the last 13 years. Mentor Me is about doing things right. It's about knowing how things work to the degree that you can then decide how you want to utilize those tools. It's not the light goes here at this angle, the light goes there, you take your picture. It's all about these are your choices, these are the properties of what we're working with, and then you make the decision, and then it's your picture. It's not a carbon copy clone of mine. And this is the important thing that we try to get across when we mentor. We give you the knowledge and the tools for you to make your own decisions and for you to solve your own problems. Because if we're teaching you in an ABC 1, 2, 3 way, the light goes 8 foot away from you at an axis of 43 degrees, 45 degrees up. What happens when you're in a 6 foot room or a 4 foot room and you need to get that picture of that celebrity and you've got 15 minutes to do it? If you haven't got the knowledge of how the physics works, then you start to struggle. And you know what? It isn't that hard, because I ain't the sharpest knife in the drawer. And if I can do it, I can teach you to do it. The other consideration of training and mentoring with me is that I understand we live in a real world. There's no point in blowing your mind here with a 17 light setup and saying, whoa, look how good I am. Because it needs to be stuff that in real terms, in realistic terms, we can all do. So we're going to set up a 4 light setup today. We'll have a key, we'll have a fill, and then the important bit are actually the lights that you can't see behind me, because what I do want is a proper, full-on, full quality, evenly lit white wall that isn't going to push light back and cause an issue. So there's a little bit of zonal control of lighting, and there's maybe a high-end fashion shoot tip or trick that I'll show you that you'll understand, hopefully enjoy, and maybe even be able to implement. But it will allow me to show you that some of the things we believe, some of the knowledge that's out there, some of the teaching that's out there, some of the dogma and the doctrine is actually not 100% correct. Okay, so what we're looking at now is the back of the studio facing, or rather the back of the camera room facing towards. There's Chris, he's in control of all the shindiggery that you're seeing today. And it's worth giving a little shout out. This light and this light, and most important, not most importantly, but as importantly, this light. they're actually not going to affect the picture in any way, but they're the lights that we're using to be able to film this. And these, the much brighter ones, the round chap there and the rectangular chap there, are both glow pad pros from Essential Photo, from Pixar Photo. And I've never been an LED fan, but these things have really changed my mind. So let's talk about the lights we're going to use to create our picture. And I will prove in a minute how the glow pads aren't going to do anything to affect the picture, unless of course I want them to. You'll see there our main light is a 1.5 metre strip box. I'm a huge fan of strip boxes because it allows me to control the light to get a nice soft light without it actually going all over the place, and that's attached to a City 400 Pro. And then up there on that C stand there's a City 300 Pro fitted with a little set of barn doors. Now this is maybe something that not everybody has, but it's how I designed my camera room. So if we look up where that light's pointing, that light is going to bounce off that intersection of wall or half wall and ceiling, and it's going to give me what was known in the bad old days of film, a splash fill. The light's going to bounce off the wall. That small, well, it's not a small light, is it? But the light actually hitting the ceiling and the wall will be about 6 or 8 foot. But as it comes all the way back down towards us, it obviously expands and grows exponentially, and it becomes softer and softer and softer. And that's the light that I'm going to use to control the degree of fill on the shadow side of my model. The key is what's going to create the shape and form. And then if I come back a little bit further, it's these two lights, this one on the right and its twin immediately behind me, that's going to make the difference. Now these are City 300 Pros bounced into the corner of an 8 foot by 4 foot V flat, and that V flat is open now, so I'm guessing the whole thing is probably 8 foot by maybe 6 foot wide. So that light's going to hit the corner, and there's no modifier on these at all. This is why I've got this roving cam, so I can show you. It's literally just bare bulb. So we're going to get 180 degrees of light, and that's dead important to fill that. But if you look at this, if I come to the edge of the V flat, oh, there you go, join the edges up, you don't see the light, because obviously this is the edge this side, and then there's the edge of the other side of the V flat there. And if I line those both up, doop, most importantly, you can't see the bulb of that light. So that means that that's not affecting or coming forward to affect Lily. What's going to happen is the light's going to bounce into that intersection, and then it's going to sort of flood the scoop. But it will be bright, 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 going off, going off, going off, going off to the middle where it'll be at its lowest. And then on this side, we have its absolute twin. Same height, same size, same position, same light, same, if I come round to the front, no modifier, just bare bulb, same berry, the light up just inside the V flat. So the light, the only light, its usable light if you like, is hitting the V flat, bouncing out and coming back to hit the scoop. And as I prove how good stabilisation is, because my dodgy old walking stick legs don't allow me to do that very well or very quickly, you'll see that that space between those two sets of V flats is going to give me the most evenly lit, most controllable white background you will have ever seen. And it's a tip, or it's a trick that fashion, we use in the fashion industry. You know, when we look at things that, you know, tend to be a little bit gadgety, where it's a self-illuminating thing or stuff like that, there's no real need, because if you know what you're doing, you're able to create a more controllable, smoother look yourself in the studio. Now granted, I've got a little bit more space than most. That scoop's 24 foot across, or 22, 24 foot across. But again, it was built with purpose in mind. But just because it's this big doesn't mean you can't do it. So what I have to do now is start thinking about how I'm going to put the lighting together and how I'm going to meter and measure it. Right, so let's have a little chat about my capture device first. I'm going to create this picture on the Fujifilm GFX 50R. It's the medium format rangefinder style camera. The reason it's a rangefinder is I just like them. It's my personal preference. I love rangefinder cameras. I've got the X Pro 3 from Fuji, which is a rangefinder, and my favourite Olympus is the Pen F, again, rangefinder. I just like them. Makes no difference to the picture, it's just the way it works. I've got attached to my camera the 110mm f2. It's the longest focal length I own for the medium format camera. In 35mm terms, it's a short telephoto lens of around 85mm roughly. Don't quote me on that, mental arithmetic isn't my strong point, despite my mum being a maths teacher. But what I want to prove to you initially is that the glow pads that are lighting me for filming aren't affecting the picture. So this is the most important tool I own. It's an independent handheld incident light meter. And the truth is, if you've not got one or you're not using yours, it's a bit like an electrician not testing things with a phase detection screwdriver. I used to call them testy screwdrivers until I did a presentation with an electrician in the audience. And instead of having the phase detection, checking your sockets work that way. This doesn't have to be this make, doesn't have to be this model, but you do need this. It is an important empirical tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure the ambient illumination, the light that exists, the light we can see. In other words, no flashlight. So I've turned the meter on, I've set it into the ambient mode, I've put in it the ISO that I'm shooting at, which will be 200 ISO. Please forgive the little clicks and bangs in the studio, we're still very much a working studio. And all I'm going to do is point it back to camera position and take a meter reading. And it's telling me that at 5.6 I'd have to shoot an 1/8 of a second to make whatever stood here expose properly. Now I'm probably actually going to shoot at 5.6 or maybe f8. If it's f8, it's 1/4 of a second. Now I'm not sure on the depth of field yet, simply because, or the choice of aperture for the depth of field, simply because I don't really know how I'm going to pose Lily. I'm still sort of making it up in my mind as I go. But what I can do to prove to you that none of this is affecting anything, if I run over and grab this little set of steps, and then, well, that's as runny as I get, I guess, at my age and state of health. But that's where we're talking about. If I go back to camera position now and take a picture at 5.6 at a 1/25th of a second, which is my flash sync speed, we'll be able to pop in what you see, which will be a very underexposed image. You might be able to see the shape of the set of ladders, but I very much doubt you'll get much out of it. So may as well just frame it up so it looks semi-reasonable. Focus is locked. So set the camera up, 5.6, 1/25th of a second. Off we go. We'll see you'll see the shape maybe, but you will see a very underexposed picture. And that will prove that the lights that we are filming under are not really adding anything to the final flash related capture. I think probably it's now time to get Lily to come and stand on set so we can show you what the lights are doing. So we're welcoming Lily onto the set. She has the hardest job because she has to stand here while I'm explaining and poking things and moving lights and redoing things. So big ups for Lily. Now we've got 4 lights to worry about, and I'm going to be using a wireless transmitter because the Pixel Pro light All the city lights have built-in receivers. That makes life easier, so there's no cables trailing or any malarkey like that. So the key light is going to be A. So the gridded strip box, or the strip box, is going to be A. Don't know if I'm keeping it gridded yet. B is the light behind this V flat. C is the light behind that V flat, and D is the fill light that we're bouncing off the return. The thing I'm most interested in to begin with in this style of picture is I've got to get my background light right for that pure white look. So what we'll do is we'll shoot light B singly, then C singly, so I make sure that they're absolutely matched and balanced, and then I shoot them together combined, and I'll explain why that's important when we get to that stage. Now, I've already said that I want to shoot this at capture probably 5.6, maybe 6.3. So what that tells me is, and this is going to be your first surprise, I know that there's loads of information out there that tells you that if you want a white pure 255 Photoshop background, that you are overexposing your background by 2 to 3 stops. I will tell you that that is absolutely rubbish, and I will show you why. Because if I'm pumping that much light into the picture, where does the primary most direct light source come from? This. That wall becomes a giant softbox and the light is pushed back. Now, we want it to do that, but what we don't want it to do, and we've all seen these or maybe even taken them, those high key background pictures where the light seems to bleed through the flesh and eat into the arms and, you know, make the hair blow out. Well, that's just bad control because you're 2 to 3 stops over. You only really need a stop, maybe a stop and a third, to make that a pure white background. So I have to balance my background lights carefully. They're probably the most important lights to control in this picture. So I've turned on light B, the light that's behind here. And all I'm interested in now is what its power is. So I've got to meter its power here from the middle of my scoop, so right behind Lily. So you mightn't see much going on here, but what you will, or what I should point out, is first of all, I'll turn my meter on to measure flashlight. That catches me out an awful lot when I'm thinking, why is it not working, and I'm in the wrong system. But from the middle, I'm no longer pointing the dome of the meter back to the camera. I'm pointing it back to the individual light. Take a test flash and I've got 5.6 and 6/10 of a stop, which is exactly where I want to be. But I've got to check that the distribution of the light is right. And the only way I can do that is by taking a test picture. So it's back to the camera. So at this point, I'm not really bothered about the bit of ladder leg in the shot or even posing Lily. It's not relevant to what I'm doing. What is relevant is what I see that light B, the background light, doing. So here comes my quick snap. And what we should see, if I've got it right, is the left-hand side, camera left of frame, should be much brighter, and there should be a gradual degradation of light over to camera right. So you'll be able to see it sort of going from bright, bright, bright to darker, 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 and down to maybe even a grey. And I now know that that light is doing its thing for me, and I'm quite happy with where it is. So here's the next little bit of magic. I'm going to turn it off, because when I look at light C to perfect my white background, I don't want light B confusing me or the issue. I want to see each light individually, the Lego brick way, one layer of light at a time. So it's time to go and turn this one on. But this one I can be a little bit more lazy with, because everything is the same distance. All I've got to worry about is they're at the same settings. Now you might ask, why am I not telling you what the power output of that light is? It's not because I'm keeping some sort of secret from you. The reason I'm not telling you is it's not relevant. It's only relevant in this situation, right here, right now, with these distances, in this camera room, here. I move it 6 inches one way or the other and it'll change, and that's just the way it is. So it's not that I'm not telling you. What I will be doing is we'll be talking in EVs, exposure values. So everything will be EV plus or minus in relation to the key. And then that way you can go out and you can take the picture as well. So I'm way back here again. I've got to meter that light separately. Now it's the same as we've just done, but I'm going to turn my meter from the middle, from behind Lily, back to the light I'm measuring. Quick flash. Once more, because I forgot to press the button. Quick flash, and it's again 5.6 and 6/10 of a second. So it's exactly where I want it to be. Quick test picture, and we'll know if we've got everything working the way we want it. Right, so what we're looking for in this test picture is the exact mirror image to what happened in the other test, where light A was brighter on camera left, fading out to camera right. We want light B, A is the key light. So B, from white fading out to grey, left to right, we want it to be the opposite way round here. And where the two fades of light meet, they'll pick themselves up, hopefully, as we'll see in a minute. But the picture that we've squirted up, you should see brighter to camera right, darker to camera left. Right, the interesting thing to see is as I'm building up the test picture, you can see the professionalism of Lily, and that's why she's our in-house model, because she's slowly slipping into the pose that we've discussed, which just shows how good she is at what she does. So what we've done now is we've turned light B on and we've turned light C on. We've done them independently where you've seen the graduation. So both lights together, right? Both lights together will give me a totally smooth white background, hopefully, if I'm right. The only way to see that is to run over to the camera, take a test picture, squirt it down onto the screen for you, and then I'll talk about that picture and how that picture works, because there's a little bit of measuring that we have to do now should it not be the way I want it to be. But let's see, and we'll measure anyway just to prove how things are working for you. So this is the combination of both lights. Too many steps in my studio, that, I'm afraid. So where are we? Quick snap, not overly bothered about how it's looking. We just want to see what's happening. Squirting that down the camera wire back to you so you can see what's happening. And if I'm very lucky or very skilled, whichever it may be, I don't really mind, you'll see that what we've got is an even illumination of background. Now you'll also see that there might be areas, and probably I'm guessing in the very thin single layers of foam, that may show a little bit of light bleed through. I'm seeing the monitor now, so yeah, I'm right, I can see what I'm talking about. Now if my studio was perfect and it wasn't designed for the type of work we do normally, Lily would just be an absolute silhouette now. But because my studio is very light and very bright, what's happening is the light's hitting that wall, making it white, coming forward, bouncing off all this stuff and coming back and throwing a bit of fill in Lily. That's not a bad thing, it'll help me. What I need to know, let's measure the light at the wall. And this is the hard one for me, because I have to get me out of the way and do both lights together. Third time lucky. Haha, and the maths shows itself there to be exactly what we were hoping it to be. 2, 5, 6 and a halves together makes just over 11.5. So 2 stops together gives us another stop, and that's what's creating that clean white space. So if it was just 5.6 and 5.6, we'd get F8. 5.6 and a half and 5.6 and a half gives us F11. So we're probably overcooking it a little bit now, which is why we've got that bleed coming through. So all that means for me, to make my life easier, is I'm just going to shoot it, instead of at 5.6, I'll shoot it at F8. And then I'll just know that F8 needs to be what comes out of me key light. But can you see how clean and simple that background is? Now the really important bit is when we get to this point and we meter the light off the back of Lily's head, because that will tell us how much light has come forward off the wall and whether we want it to affect the picture or we don't. Right, so we've done light B by itself, we've done light C by itself. So what we need to do now is B and C together. And if I'm right, the grey areas will be filled in by the light from the other unit. And when we've measured the units singly, 5.6 and 5 or 6 tenths, I think it was, the combination of them between in the middle, hopefully, will now be F8. It'll be a stop more. So let's just take a meter reading and see. This is the hard bit because I have to get me out of the way. Oof. And with my back, it's not a clever thing. Right, and the meter reading is 5.6 and 9 tenths. So 1/10 of a stop less than the F8 that I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do nothing. 1/10 of a stop's not worth worrying about. Let's test it and see before we have to amend anything. I'm fairly certain it'll be absolutely perfect, and it'll prove to you that you don't even need 1 stop more light to get a pure white background. Because what I don't want to happen is I don't want the light to leach through here. There are areas of the outfit sort of behind Lily's head where it's just one layer of 2.5mm foam that the light may come through, but I can check that it's not going to be too aggressive by measuring the light from the back of her head with the meter facing back to the wall, and that's giving me 5.6. So basically it's going to be balanced with the key, so I'll just need to give the key 1/3 of a stop more. Bob's your uncle, I won't have leached through light, hopefully, but let's prove it. Let's see. Oh, too many steps away. My studio was designed so actually if I wanted to shoot beauty on a 600mm lens I could do, because although I'm sort of not on the scoop now, I'm probably 15 foot away from the edge of the scoop, so I am maybe 25 foot away from Lily. I could go back as much as 60 foot if needs arose. So let's take this picture of both background lights combined, and hopefully, and there's no hope in it because we've measured, we'll see a pure white background that has minimal bleed through because the light isn't leaching through her. So the thing to do now, until we're ready to take the picture, the main picture, is to turn off our background lights. Now if I was doing it manually, I'd go over and I'd turn them off, but because of the Mark IV trigger I'm using, with the lighting system I can just turn it off at the trigger so they don't flash. But you know what? Somebody's going to tell me that I'm cheating and I'm not doing it right, so I'm just going to turn the lights off. That one's off. And now, oops, wrong button. That one's off. So what I'm concerned about now is my key light. So this is the first time I have to really think about the pose that I want Lily in and what Lily's going to do. And I'm going to probably turn her this way a little bit, and then I can get the key light in and I can check that it's doing the right thing for me. I am going to pull the grid off because I think I'll need a little bit more spread to my light. But you can see now that less than one stop, not this 2 to 3 stops, less than one stop gives me a pure white background. Good, isn't it? Right, so as you can see, I've removed the egg crate, the grid from the front. Here's a little Damian tip. If I can get away with it, I never take them off fully. What I've done is I've left it attached at the bottom because it's not going to make any difference, you know, an inch worth of the damn thing. And then I've wrapped it around my lighting stand. That way I'm not going to lose it. I know it fits with this modifier and hopefully, fingers crossed, all will be good. You may also notice that my light stand and my light is on casters. I thoroughly recommend doing that in the studio because it's just easy peasy to move my light around. And all right, you know, you might say, well, okay, you're a little bit older or a little bit more infirm, and that's true, and I can't deny that. That's what 35 years of photography does to you, and a little bit of other things. But the point is, let's not get into my condition. Let's be sensible from the start and stick some casters on your stand, make life easier. So light A can now be turned on. And there you go. Even though I was on the wrong side of the controls, you can see with my stand, it makes life much easier. I'm going to turn the modelling lamp on so I can see what I'm doing, because this does become critical now. Because of the way we've designed the outfit, we've obviously got these sort of wings protruding either side of Lily's face. So I need to make sure I've got the light in the right place. It needs to be a tiny bit higher because I'd like there to be fall off towards the bottom of the image, towards the skirtage of the image. And by canting the light over as I have, if I turn the stand side on, you can see that it's not set straight. This is much nearer by maybe, what, 6 inches, 8 inches, oh, maybe even a foot, towards Lily, which means I'm lighting into the top of the picture more, which is going to work a little bit as a pseudo hair light for me. Now, I am competing with this really bright glow pad at the moment to see where things are going. So what I'm going to do is just turn the glow pad off so I can position this exactly. I may as well do it on camera, because then if I fall over, we've got something cool for Jeremy Beadle. So I'm pretty much where I want to be now, where I'm skimming the light across her face as best as possible, but still keeping light into the mask of the face and not allowing the wings of the headdress to cause me any grief. But I can't be 100% accurate until I'm looking from the taking position. So I need to meter the light, and then I can take me test picture of just light A. What you don't know, the hard thing is, I can see Lily's face now, and I'm talking to you, and I'm watching her pull funny faces at me and yawn. And I do have that effect on ladies, and sometimes camera audiences too. But what we're talking about is always going to be sense. Now I want this light to rake a little bit, so I'm just going to go 6 inches that way and feather it back. Now, back wall is f8, so we want this to be 5/6, and this is where I have to start making decisions, artistic decisions, because 5/6 is the right number, but I might want to overexpose it, I might want to underexpose it, but I can't tell that yet until I take the test picture. So let's meter it up first. Backlights are off. Now I'm touching the meter to Lily's nose, and I'm pointing the dome back to the principal light, back to this one, the key light, the one we're worried about at this moment in time, and that was 5.6 and a couple of tenths. So I could either turn it down and be exact, but I tend to like to overlight Lily's skin slightly for the effect that I like. So I'm going to leave it at 5.6 and 2/10 and just see how it looks. Again, I'm not overly worried about putting the props in and making the picture perfect yet. I'm just worried about making sure that the mask of the face is looking at the direction, and the light is looking at her in the way I want it to be. So let's take a test picture and look. One thing that I can tell you is I've just bought myself a grey background for free because of the inverse square law. I should maybe whistle as I'm walking to the camera, because it must be ever so slightly boring and annoying as I wander 20 odd foot back. But as long as Lily's in frame roughly the way I want it to be, I'm just going to take my test shot, and lo and behold, we should get that free grey background that the inverse square law tells us we're allowed. And I'm going to come and have a little look at the screen, just because I want to check. Oh, it's almost like I know what I'm doing, because I've got a little bit of a loop pattern off Lily's nose. The light's getting right into the headpiece. Mask of the face is well lit. That's fine. I've now got to decide what I'm going to do with the fill light, so I'm going to turn the key off. Now this is a bit that Lily hates, because Lily can't move now unless we put a marker on the floor so we know where she's got to go back to. So light D's now on my fill light, and as you can see, look how big that single bulb without a modifier has become. That's probably, let's open that side of the barn door a bit. See, being disabled is not always a bad thing. So that must be what, maybe 7, 8 foot across. And by the time that it comes back down here, it'll just grow and grow and grow. Now the important thing in the Damian McGillicuddy playbook of lighting is my fill light has to be on the same side as my key light. If it's not on the same side, if it was over there, I run the risk of getting inconsistent catch light direction and an inconsistent fall of shadow. So unfortunately, in our world, we only have one sun. So I'm looking for consistent direction in everything. If we were on Tatooine, where it has 2 suns, little joke for Star Wars nerds, there's no need to worry, but we're not. We've got one sun, so I want one prevailing direction of light. Now this is the bit that I've really got to think about here. Not in a technical way, but in an aesthetic way. Because how much fill light I put in will totally determine the feel of the picture. If I put too much in here, I'm going to sort of flatten the lighting off that we've worked hard to get with light A, and the effect of this transition from the bright glowy nun to something that's turning a little bit more sinister won't have the same effect. So I'm thinking of maybe measuring my fill, or getting my fill to measure maybe 2.8. So 2 stops less, a 3:1 ratio. And I think that'll look pretty cool. So let's just start metering away. Remember, no other lights on now. It's only the fill light. And I'm pointing back, not to the physical light, but to the patch of light that we've got on that return, because that's the real modifier. That's the light source, not the City 300 Pro. So just keeping it up in that direction. Quick test. That's F4, so it's too much power, which amazes me for that unit. The 300 is really my most favourite light of all time. I really love it. It's a very, very cool light. And just out of interest, that was a 32nd of its total power, delivering 1 stop more than I wanted, which I find quite impressive for such a small unit. And I'm sorry I'm talking with my back towards you, but hey, it's my studio and I can pretty much do what I want. No, that's not true at all, is it? But it's important, you know, consistency is hugely important in a studio. Process, system, accuracy. You know, you've just got to get it right. There's no excuse. And the more you get it right here, the less you have to do on a computer. And that's a big thing for me, because I don't want to do rivers of work sat at a computer. If I'm sat at a computer, I'd rather be playing an arcade game. So let's take the test with our fill, and what we should have is an underexposed image of Lily, but all I'm interested in, oops is not a good word in photography, but you may have noticed I'm using the trigger that should be on the top of the camera to trigger my light meter. And I keep forgetting to put it back, but that proves one thing: nobody's perfect and everybody makes a mistake, and as long as you correct the mistake, you're golden. So let's see what this light's going to do for me. It'll squirt into the computer, and all I'm interested in at this stage isn't the fact that she's underexposed, but by how much underexposed the oh, there's one of me. Just put that to the side for a minute. Fill out my back pocket, mask for my face. What I am interested in is how dense the densest shadows are. The under the chins, the in the back here of the headdress, etc. Because most of my work ends up in print, whether it's on somebody's wall or in a magazine or in a book, it's in print. So I have to be very, very careful about the density of the shadows. Too dark shadows and everything fills up and it becomes kludgy. And photography is all about control, and if we can control it, why wouldn't we? So once you're in our training academy and you know you can trust me, I would be stood at the camera now just remotely turning each light on. But because we're proving to you that we are genuinely doing this, there's no smoke or mirrors, we've turned the lights off as we've gone. Manually, we've literally turned the power off. So that's why I've had to come all the way back here to turn them back on again. So does it really matter? No, it doesn't, if it means that you get to understand that what we're doing is real and live. I'm hoping you can hear the beep of the light coming on as we're doing it, and you'll have noticed that Lily's now got a prop or two props, and as this is the transition picture between peace and beauty and maybe something a bit more sinister, we're now adding love, represented by the flare, and war, represented by the sword, into the piece. So this is the first time we've got all the lights on. So it's back to the camera, it's taking the picture. The camera settings have not changed since the very first exposure. It's just the incremental build of the lights that's made the picture look a little bit better. So it's back to the camera, take a picture, make sure I'm happy with what I'm seeing in frame. I have pulled back a little bit more and I've zhuzhed the train of the dress out a tiny bit. And if I'm happy with the exposure, we can then worry about the pose, and I'll take maybe 3 or 4 different pictures just so I'm happy and I've got choice. So off we go. Okay, so this is the first test shot with all the lights on. I'm just going to make sure I've got my focusing point over Lily's face, because that's the important thing at the end of the day. There's my first test shot, and let me just review it on the back of the camera, because when it popped up for a second there, is my fill light too much? Maybe I'm going to turn my fill down a third of a stop. Now, because we've got them all on, I can do this from camera. How cool is that? So let's just turn my lights on. I'm having to tip my head here. Hang on, let me remember this. A is key, B is wall left, C is wall right. So it's D I'm after, and I'm going to turn it down a third of a stop because I want the shadow to be a tiny bit darker camera right. So let's take another image and see if I'm happy now. And that's the wonderful thing about digital photography. We can check as we go, and if it's not right, that's a bit better. Except I've not got the end of the dress in because I'm trying to shoot off the back of the camera, so we'll do it again. There we go. Right, and that for me holds a little bit more story. So I'm absolutely happy with the lights. I just want to make sure that I've got the right pose. So I now need to do a little bit of finessing and a couple of files to be shot. So Lily, can you bring that sword in front of you a little bit more? Touch the tip down and then just let it lean that to your right slightly. That's awesome. So it really makes a difference if you've got a relationship with the subject and the subject understands you. And chin down just a little bit, so it's all getting a bit sad this now. It's not how you want the world to be. Things are changing. That's great. Sorry, no problem. Let's shoot again. Lean the sword a little bit more to camera left. That's perfect. And then turn your hips away from you just a little bit more. And chin down a little bit more. Sad, sad, sad. Superb. And then let's split the pair up. Let's keep the sword in right hand and let's have the flower, which now gives me a big retouching issue with the steel thing. Just down like that. That's awesome. That's really cool. Head to your right ever so slightly. Chin down just a smidgetta. I absolutely love that. Superb. So that's all 4 lights together, creating the narrative of the image that we started out with at the beginning. Now, of course, we'll post-produce this. We'll make sure that there's nothing, no stray hairs, nothing wrong with the picture. I'm looking over here now, sorry, at the monitor. Basically, because it just amazes me what a fantastic model Lily is. She's just so easy to work with. And I'm noticing that I can see the stem of the rose, and on this GFXR, we'll be able to tell that it's not real, so maybe there's a bit of retouching work for me to go on there. But you can see that I've got myself a number of different crops, a number of different looks. What I am going to do, because I've just realised I've been shooting in 3:2, is I'm going to go back to the camera and shoot in a 4:3 ratio, so it gives me extra space around the train of the dress. And that should be exactly how I want it to be. So we'll go and shoot that again, and then each little sequence, and then we'll pop them up again, and you'll see the difference giving a subject room to breathe in the crop makes. So back to the camera. Sorry, Lil. Yeah, we'll go backwards. Actually, that's a top tip. Lily has at least one brilliant idea every day. And I say at least one, it's normally loads. But that's top tip, and she's just said that because basically this is what happens when you work together so much, that we're going backwards now. So we're just remembering, because there's no point in a change in the original pose. Chin down, head to the right slightly, chin down a little bit more. Sad, 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 sad. Sorry, it just missed me focus point because I'm busy trying to chat. Right, that's perfect. Sad, 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 sad. Chin down. Next pose, please. You'll also notice that Lily's just tucked the stem of that flower behind her arm there, because she heard me mention that, oh, I've got to retouch it. And again, being part of a team is a great thing in what we do, because she's made that adjustment to save me retouching shenanigans time. Lily, the leaves on this side to me are just a tid ugly. And again, there's no point in pressing the shutter. Actually, I like that as well. We'll do that as well. There's no point in pressing the shutter if the image isn't right. Head to me just a tiny, perfect. Chin down. Very sad on this one. Eyes to the floor. Very sad. Awesome. Right, change the pose so it touches the sword touches the floor. Brilliant. Chin down. Head to me a smidge. Eyes to camera. Awesome. And then there's one more pose, isn't there? Is there one more pose? Right. Yeah, keep it there, but put your right hand on the leather of the grip of the sword. That's better. It's a strong picture. See, when you've got something good, you just want to keep going, don't you? Eyes to camera. Tip your head a little more for me. Sorry, I caught that blink. Eyes to the floor. And then the word that Lily, or the words that Lily likes to hear most is, it's a wrap, thank you very much. You can go and get yourself back into human clothes. And that's it. It proves that you can take an amazing image quite simply, building the lights up one atop the other. That's how good photography works, because there's not that much that I have to do now in post-production to take that from a great picture to a fantastic picture. And when we've done the final series of all three and they're hanging next to one another, I will be super duper proud. So this is the bit that we tend to do in the camera room in our education. It will either be specifics on how something actually works, the properties of a strip box, how to get the best out of a beauty dish, the inverse square law, ratios, angles, posing, everything and anything, even down to a full-blown shoot. We'll be in here, we'll be outside, we'll be on location. I'll be doing everything I can to give you as much of the knowledge that I've learned in my 35 years of being a photographer, so you can grow exponentially faster than you would do on your own, or you would do by cherry picking little bits of information. Because what we should be doing is learning key core skills so we can go on and take the pictures that we want to take. That's what photography is about. That is how you develop your style. So, one of the most important parts and most confidence building features in Mentor Me are the live image critiques. And over the years, this has gone from projection to finding out that in the pandemic, actually working the critiques with this app and an iPad gives even greater understanding and a historical record of critiques for those in the group. Now, my background is I've been an internationally accredited print judge for about 15, 16, maybe even 17 years now. And I've judged Australian competitions, I've judged all over the Scandinavian countries, I've judged obviously in the UK a tremendous amount, judging for the Master Photographers Association, judging at guild events, and judging at the Societies of Photographers, where I've been chair of qualification and senior judge, chair of chairs. So my experience is relatively robust in being a print judge. I've also had the pleasure of starting the judges training group within the Societies of Photography alongside the Director of Competitions, Terry Jones, and I've run that for several years and brought on a lot of the top UK judges at the moment, which I've been very proud to have done. So let's see how this works within the system for us. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to make sure that I never see the images before the first critique, because I want that impact that the image has on the first viewing. So Leslie loads everything up for me, so there is no pre-visual check for me from the images. Now the first thing I like here is the muted colours. I like the fact that the tonality and the saturation has been played down. The reason why I like that is because it works with the narrative of the image, with the sort of dried, older, starting to turn and rot flowers. The composition works well with the main bunch
of the stems being on an intersecting rule of third, and the interest in the petals being on a double intersecting rule of thirds. So compositionally, this sort of letter R shape works really well for us because it brings multiple points of interest into intersections, compositional intersections, which allow our eye to enjoy the composition. The other thing that I think works very well is the black line of integrity, which shows that the author has nothing to hide beyond the frame. It was originally a photojournalistic thing when images were captured on film, and it was the edge of the film rebate to show people that everything that was taken was whole and there wasn't any manipulation within what the photojournalist was seeing. Now, negative points, because it's very easy to say really nice things about pictures and not necessarily get any points where the author is learning. Having that section of the composition, the main body of interest, the petals from the flowers, intersect the edge of the frame is always a negative to me, because what it does is it takes the eye compositionally outside of the image, which is never a good thing. The texture added works quite well as well, and the lighting is subtle, it has direction, and it shows texture and form. So overall it works quite well. What I would say to the author is look at the space, look at the tightness of the image in some of the areas of the picture. This works really well, where the eye is given the chance to sort of wander around the frame. So that's very important, to have space within the composition. Wow. One of the things I love about macro photography is the detail that you see. You know, in this instance, we're seeing things that we don't see with the naked eye. The hairs on the spider's legs, the translucence in part of its body, how it sits and attaches on the web. And that really is nice. The way that the photographer has observed the light or lit the image works really well, because it gives us shape, form, texture, and it's just a very, very nicely executed macro image. Now, interestingly enough, there are a couple of things that we can look at again. Having key points of the animal so close to the edge of the frame draws our eye out, and that's never an intention that we want within an image. Having light parts within the picture towards the edge of the frame, in fact, that highlight on that web literally just draws your eye away. So it's giving us, or it's giving our eye areas to pick up and focus on that take us away from the main focal point and reason for the picture, which is obviously to enjoy the spider and have interest in seeing things that we don't naturally see. I mean, it's well documented that I'm no wildlife expert. It doesn't really hold interest to me in knowing the Latin names and knowing the nature of the animal. But I am always totally blown away when I see things that I don't naturally see. The texture, the shading, the shape, the patterning on the, I'm assuming it's the abdomen of the spider, is quite fascinating. The hairs are fascinating. The other thing that's worth pointing out here, as we've blown the image up, is the only way we could make this picture potentially more appealing or more useful for natural history is if we'd used a technique of focus stacking, because at this size it's just a physical impossibility to get from this area to this area and beyond to the other leg sharp without taking multiple images incrementally moving the focal point backwards within the picture and then stacking all the sharp parts together and forming one picture. Some cameras have the ability to do this internally, like some of the Olympuses, and some images are taken with maybe 100 frames, and then software like Helicon Focus is used to stack them together. So when we don't have the ability to focus stack, we need to make sure that the parts of the image that we keep sharp really hold our attention within the frame and are interesting pieces. So maybe if we saw the mandibles on the jaw of the spider or its eyes, they would be focal points that we would want to keep sharp. I'm a little bit of a sucker for this type of picture. I like the fact that it's almost a near abstract. We know what it is, but we're looking on shape and form. We're looking at texture, colour. Now, I don't know whether it's just because the author hasn't supplied a file big enough, but there appears to be no critical point of focus here. So where I would expect the critical point to be, sorry, wrong choice of colour, where I'd have expected it to be around this area, the centre of the flower, it appears that the critical point may actually be there, which compositionally doesn't actually work for me. So you need to think when you're doing this type of picture where it is an almost abstraction, where do you want the viewer's eye to go to? Because at the moment we're just seeing colour and texture as opposed to a critical point, focal point within the image where the eye's being drawn to. So maybe this needs a little bit of a rethink. Right, this is the perfect example to counterpoise what I was just saying, where the critical point of focus is definitely there, and being centric works well because the makeup of the flower gives us concentric circles as the petals fall one on top of the other, and this gives us a focal point which allows us to have a much more pleasing visual experience when we're looking at the image. Now again, notice if we go backwards and compare, having that little black line of integrity to hold your eye within the frame actually is very powerful. So if you imagine adding that to this picture, you're going to increase what's already a great shot into a more powerful shot. See how that, very badly drawn with my shaky hand, just adds a boundary to the edge of the picture which holds the eye in better, and therefore this image is, even without that little black line of integrity, is much more successful than the previous one. Right, we're on a roll now. We're on a progression imagery wise now. I think this is sepals and stamens, if I remember my science lessons from school. But considering that they're maybe 35 years ago, I'm not going to hold myself to that. Now, again, interestingly enough, compositionally it works well. Technique-wise it works well. That is the critical point of focus within the picture. It shows, I think it's pollen. It shows all the interesting bits, but because the petals of the flower are so dynamic with the bleeds of colour, again, our eye struggles within the frame, where this and these lines are the importance of drawing our eye into the area of the picture here, and this bit actually just serves to confuse. So maybe a square crop would give us a lot more power and a lot more narrative within the picture. So now you can see if we discount this third of the frame, our eye is brought really immediately into register on what the artist has seen as the primary focal point of the picture. So don't always shoot in the format that our camera represents. Look for the natural composition within things and look for a composition that you want to tell your story within. Right, this is one of those pictures that I always think, what a charming little image that the parents would absolutely love and die for. The critical focus is good, the expression on the child is good, but maybe it's a little tight, and what it actually needs is a little bit more negative space just to let the client's eye rest within the frame correctly. We've done the right thing with the crop, that it looks a deliberate crop. Sometimes, when the crop's indistinct, we don't know whether it's a mistake or whether it's a deliberate visual act from the photographer. And it's a charming picture that I know the clients will love, and that's what we try to produce mentoring, quality saleable pictures. Expression's good, composition's good, although it would benefit from the wider view. That also means that it just gives the size of the child's head greater balance within the frame, which means there'd be a bigger sale ultimately. I can't get away from the sort of amber type post-production finish, which I don't actually think works well within this frame. It's giving me too many similar tones, and I think if we took the warmth away and we had a colder palette, the high key nature would sort of shine through a little bit more and make a much more distinct, more visually arresting picture. What a charming, charming picture that again would be a client satisfaction favourite. It's a very well used picture within newborn photography. The big sister's expression is awesome. I think maybe slightly the skin tone of the newborn is a little cool and could do with a little bit of warming up. And again, we're losing visual acuity in the fact that the power of this picture is in the fact that it really should be a square composition which has solidity and strength. One of the main pleasing issues within the image is the circular composition that we've got going on within the centre of the frame, and that gives us the narrative and the feeling and the story of togetherness, which is exactly what we want to see in this image. The picture is well lit, it's soft, it's gentle, the narrative works well with the young children, but there is shape, form and texture within the picture because there is direction in the light. Soft, wholesome, wrapping light doesn't mean it needs to be flat and without direction. And this is a really good example of keeping the ratio between specular highlight and shadow relatively low, but still maintaining direction, shape and form within that lighting. Right, I know how hard this is to do just in the posing alone. To pose 3 children together, 3 newborns. This is an absolute gold standard skill here. So let's award our author a gold star. And that is not meant to be glib in any way whatsoever. This has been constructed by somebody that really knows what they're doing when it comes to newborn photography. Newborn photography is often dismissed by purists and those of maybe a little more grumpier nature, and this is superbly well done. The composition is very beautiful in the sort of gentle open fan that we've got going on there. The light is beautifully done because it reveals shape, form, texture, within sort of skin tone. And what I do love is the fact that this hasn't been overly retouched to make every ounce of the skin perfect. I'm not a huge fan of the over softened post-production of the material. I think we would benefit seeing a little more of this texture here. That's a big tick for me, rather than letting it artificially bleed away in post-production. That is an absolute heart-stopping picture for the parents and an absolutely strong visual display piece. Sales-wise, it is very difficult to do that. This posing, the posing of the children here, the arms, the touch, the connection is very well done. The only thing I would point out, and again, actually, I don't know if this is a true statement because I don't know the triplets, but baby number 1 here compared to 2 and 3 seems very large in scale, and that might be because of a poor choice of focal length of lens, or it may actually be that baby number 1 is the alpha of the litter, if you like, the baby that naturally has greater size and heft. But if that is not the case, because if we look at this from above, and this is baby 1, there's baby 1, baby 2 is posed here, and baby 3 is posed here. So naturally, what we've got is baby 2 and baby 3, a body length back from, let's just assume, big brother or sister. And without a long telephoto to aid compression of perspective, you're always going to get that differentiation in size, even if there isn't one in the real world. So please be careful of that. Right, the first thing that hits me, there's a couple of things that hit me actually. All this side of the picture, the expression's beautiful, the lighting's nice, the styling works, the interaction with the photographer is superb. This side of the picture, I've got this feeling of wonky cake. The cake and the stand is so far off vertical, my mind sees it as falling over. Now, again, I think that's a choice of lens and angle, and that's why it's doing it, because I don't actually think it's really falling over, and I don't want it to fall over. This sort of flora and fauna style of bunting is very common in cake smash and first birthday pictures. What I would love to see, if we're looking at an aerial view, there's the back paper wall with the flora and fauna on it. What I would love to see is I'd love to see greater distance between the back paper, the subject and the props. That way we can use aperture for more differential focus, and we can take down the clarity, the degree of information in the sharpness of the background. The colours work beautifully. The whole tone, the whole colour palette is great. Maybe I'd have retouched out, I'm going to guess it might be a spoon or something, but the colour of this works with the colour of this, which works with the colour of skin, which even works really well with the colours within the cake and the cake stand. The green sort of pulls my eye up here a little bit, so to have it out of focus and backwards a bit more makes a huge deal of sense to me. So that's something I'd like the author to think about as they construct this type of picture in the future, because as it stands, this bit is competing visually with this bit, and we don't want that to be the case. I like the boldness of the contrast within baby. It is quite unusual and it works, it gives shape and form, but there's also the benefit or the thought of maybe adding a reflector just out of camera, just to control down that shadow just a little bit more, and the density. As it happens, that's more than printable and works really well, but you need to keep an eye on that and be careful. Obviously, the interpersonal skills and the way that the author deals with the children is awesome because of that expression that we're generating. There's a skill in that alone. Right, back to the triplets. Again, this, I know how hard this is. This is my first Master Photographer of the Year winning picture was with what back then was termed as a sleeping baby. The phrase newborn I don't think had even been thought of at that stage, but that baby is now 28 years old, which shows that this isn't a new thing. It was the stock and trade of what photographers used to do every day of the week. So let's look at the positives within this picture. The choice of the colour palette, the truncation in the colour palette works really well. It adds to the soft, gentle feel that the background complements the material used. The material used complements the skin. The posing again is exceptionally good with the connection between all of the children, and the repetitious pattern makes us think of groups of more of twin. It's very cleverly conceived. The sweep of the material works well compositionally, and the lighting is actually really good. It shows shape, it shows form, it shows texture, it shows three-dimensionality, because that's what we try to do within our photography. We try to tell a three-dimensional lie in a two-dimensional medium, and that works really well. I'm trying to interrogate, yeah, there we go. I can see texture here in the material that the children are lying on, and that texture isn't ugly. It doesn't pull my eye away at all, and it would have been better to leave that texture, whereas from my point of view, the blend between textured and untextured is incredibly abrupt. It's literally that space all the way round, which makes the image look like a cutout, which spoils the skill within the image. And I think that the author should go back to this piece and reduce the abruptness of the blend. The texture of that material there is not, this here is not unpleasant. None of this pulls my eye away, whereas this shallow transition between texture and blur is actually, to my mind, less appealing than keeping that texture of the material in. So I know that you've got that in the file. I know that that can be post-produced and made from what's a great picture into an amazing picture. What I would also do is try and have a little bit more space that side of the frame, just so that the edge of the material to the end of the frame isn't quite that tight. I'd want it to mirror that distance there, so there's greater breathing space. And I may also look at making it more of an anamorphic crop, because that would add impact as well. Now, having said that, it sounds hypercritical, but the truth of the matter is that's a really difficult picture that's beautifully composed, superbly lit, nicely styled. Change that abruptness between the texture of the material and the blur, and I think you're taking good to great. I love pictures of pregnant mummies. I think it's an amazing state to be. The styling here is very, dare I say it, Lola Milani. It's very New Yorky. It's very editorial. It's very magazine. The light on the mummy is beautifully done. It shows shape and form amazingly. I mean, look at the rich roundness of the belly, which is the thing that we're trying to show within this type of picture. The specular highlights on the face show depth and dimension. The pose is elegant, sympathetic and feminine, and it works really well. The styling is beautiful as well. What I would say is just watch the angle of capture. Because we're looking slightly down on the subject, it truncates, where instead of, if we imagine there's head, shoulders, belly, legs, if we, instead of shooting at this downward angle, as the author has done, if we'd have shot flat on, we'd have had a length of body that wasn't truncated. If we'd have used the fashion trick of lowering the angle of capture, having a slightly wider lens, maybe a 35 in 50mm terms, and looking up, we'd have given greater emphasis to the length and line of the leg, and it's just a more flattering picture. Now, one of the things to really watch out for when we're producing professional portraits is finishing off, and having sort of wispy, unruly bits of hair is never ever a good thing. It shows a lack of polish. Again, we've got this same warm, not quite amber type as we had with the baby image, and I'm assuming it's therefore the same author, and I'd have a little look at changing that. Yes, warm black and whites are amazing. I used to love it when Ilford made the traditional black and white papers in neutral, warm and cool, so you could choose the tonality to enhance the picture. And we have all that, well, even extra choice and ability in digital photography, because we can produce any tone that we want, but we have to make sure that that tone pleases. And this is just slightly bordering on an uncontrol of sepia that I don't think works. Black skin tends to look much better if we keep it slightly cooler. And again, it's a great capture that the client will have loved, and there's an easy post-production change here for the author to see different options within the image. This image is initially very striking. It's very old master, although we've gone for a butterfly lighting pattern, but the pose, the styling, the background choice, the simplicity of the light gives a beautiful single, complete, simplistic feel. The styling and the colour choices between background, hair, skin and material work awesomely well. The styling of turning a piece of material into a dress works beautifully. The treatment of the skin isn't overly done and doesn't look false. Just again, as we've said previously, watch for, if you're going to make something perfect and beautiful, let's make sure that we've got no flyaways and no stray split ends if we can. Watch out for highlights that pull our eye. And the hands here are quite bright, so they would have benefited greatly from flagging off. In fact, if I just do this, and I know it's a crude attempt to show you, but if we just take the light down slightly, then with those little bands of grey, you can see that the eye immediately is drawn back to the primary focus and most important part of the subject, where here at the moment the eye is going here as well because it's so bright. In fact, when we look at it and we look at the distribution of tones, other than the narrative that the placement of hands brings, there's no need for them visually to be in the picture. Because they are in the picture, we have to talk about them. And because we're talking about them, we've discussed how the degree of lightness pulls the eye away. But we should also look at the positive points and say that the hands have been nicely sympathetically posed to the style, mood and feeling within the image. So if we'd have flagged those off using maybe a couple of layers of black net to shield part of the light fall, we'd have taken again a very competent, very professional looking portrait and took it from the good category into the great category. And that's what we always must strive to do as photographers. We need to keep pushing ourselves to make what we do and what we return for our clients to be the very best that it can be. What lovely connection from the kiss to the kiss. The square composition is very strong. It's giving us dynamic compositional lines within the image and it works really well. The fact that baby is primarily lit again is a plus point, and overall the picture works sympathetically and beautifully. The black and white treatment is good. Just watch for little things like that bit of jewellery just popping out from under the hair. Again, watch for stray hairs and flyaways because they're never really appealing in a picture. That control needs to be greater. Watch as well for truncation and cutting through the body because these things need to be considered and controlled. Now, interestingly enough, there's also a very dynamic, very severe crop in this image where we can go totally Slim Jim. Now obviously as I've done this I'm doing it freehand and I'm doing it rough, so it may not be inch perfect placement, but look, if we take some of that extraneous flesh away from here and from here, look how much more we concentrate on the connection between that lovely little family unit and the touches of the kiss. So don't ever be afraid of experimenting with something a little more out of left field and unusual, because you never know, there may be a gem to be mined and unearthed there. And I think just cropping down that way shows a total difference and a total new way of looking at things, which will be visually stimulating and exciting to the client. Beautiful loop lighting pattern, nice colours in the ocular cavity, nice light within the ocular cavity, simply done. The skin is nicely retouched because it's not done to the point of being plastic. There are some little points and highlights that can be taken down even further without making the image look false. I spend half my life doing this sort of thing. Again, just putting that little black line of integrity in stops us having that bleed off of flesh from the skin into the edge and out of the edge of the picture. The main problem is the lack of control and tidiness within the hair. These things really need to be controlled to take good pictures into the category of great pictures. We're so bombarded these days with visual stimuli, and everything is at the skill level, feeling and polish of major perfume brand or beauty brand retouching, that this young lady will see these things in the magazines that she reads, the programs that she watches on TV. And although she might not be able to articulate what's wrong with the image because she doesn't have the visual acuity to do so, she will know and she will feel and she will sense that it's not quite as polished as the images that she aspires to be like. So that's something really important to bear in mind, that we're trying to produce a level of perfection that goes beyond the reality of the person without making the image overly false. It's a very fine balancing line to take, but it's something that as professional photographers or aspirationally professional photographers, we need to be really careful of as we go forward. So just think about that and think about gaining those skills and using them and practicing to make sure that we can deliver highly polished pictures. Because when the image is so beautifully simple, we focus on the minutiae, and sometimes that can be slightly unfair, but there isn't anything else to focus on because of its beautiful, elegant simplicity. So we have to make sure that everything is as polished and as perfect as it can be. What a lovely Rembrandt light. It's reflective of the narrative and the mood. The level of fill is well done in the fact that we've got a strongest shadow fall but detail therein. We've got beautifully retouched skin, and we've got a complete narrative. The other thing that's quite interesting is, although I'm fairly certain that that is a composite, the composite has been very well done in the fact that the direction and feel and mood of light from the architectural light is well echoed within the picture to make me believe or make me feel that it's potentially real. The addition of the retouched Sagrillo works really well. The smoke is better produced than the Sagrillo or the cigar itself. So that needs a little bit of attention. It actually needs just a bit more retouched shadow into it to make this look more cylindrical and less flat. The narrative works beautifully. It's sort of very much an Agatha Christie who did it type of image, and I can see it being very useful for the likes of book covers. But if that's the case, then we actually need greater space within the frame to allow for text, to allow for titles, to allow for space. So if its intention was for stock, then it needs that space to create more utility within the image. If it's a fantasy image shot for the person who wants to echo that flapper type era, it's very well done indeed. Just watch for highlights, watch for lights or bright parts of an image towards the edge of the frame, because it just pulls our eye away from where we want to be, which is here. And again, have a little thought of a greater degree of differential focus. It has been taken down in focus here, but a little bit more maybe would have helped, and toning down the brightness of the lamps would have brought the eye strongly back towards the figure a little more. The styling and the propping of the image is beautifully done. You know, the pistol even looks period. The outfit looks amazing. The makeup is on song as the hair is, and altogether it's a very well put together image. Again, that's not the sort of thing we necessarily want to hear within critique. We want to see how we can make things better. So watch out for things like that little addition of highlight there, and the way that the plaster moulding here, because it's not the full circle of the room, sweeps the eye again with that little catch light out of the edge of the frame. And those things, this point here and this point here, could be greater controlled by the addition of subtle vignette. Now, again, let's look at the positives first. I love the change in tone in the background, works really well. The lighting pattern is nicely done. The light into the ocular cavity and the catch light works really well. The simplistic styling, the simplistic framing, the pose, superb. Again, we're looking at some of the same issues again. Tidiness of hair, flyaways. The big thing for me though is the change in tone between makeup and the hand skin colour. A little bit of a brush of translucent powder on the edge of the blade of that hand would have brought the colours more into register together, and that would have meant that the lighter, whiter, brighter hand wouldn't have drawn my eye away. If I take those lines away, you can see that the lightest, brightest part of the image is here, and that's where my eye is drawn. So think about maybe a little brush over with the face powder brush, just to bring those tones, colours and brightness values more into register, so the eye isn't drawn away. The differential focus works very well. I love the fact that the arm falls out of focus as it pulls away from the critical point of focus. Again, just watch for catching highlights in things that we don't really want to draw our eye away from the primary part of the subject. Now, that's very dynamic and very stylised in its execution. The red of the background with the arc in it going towards pink, the red beret, the red eye makeup and the red lip all gel together for a very stylised image. And the author should be very, very commended for that, because it's strong, it's dynamic. It's quite unusual to have a flattering or try and take a flattering image of a young lady or gentleman where we're shooting from below in such tight crop, because basically what we're doing is seeing straight up the nostrils, which is never a good look for anybody. So unless it's done more stylistically and with more impact and purpose, it doesn't quite work in the way I think the author wants to. We've also got a lot of patchy banding in the skin here on the arm, which pulls the eye away again. And that's because what we've got is this amount of flesh competing with this amount of tone and flesh colour although it is nicely balanced with the blonde hair. It's almost sort of S-shaped in its composition there. We could also stand for having a little bit more of that deeper red to have greater balance and more impact from the rule of thirds. Shoulders should be turned a little bit more away from camera, so they're not quite as flat to camera as they are, because that gives a huge degree of breadth to the subject, which makes them look broader than they need to. The shoulder joint and the bicep, because of the way the light falls, are being made to look more muscular than I think is the intention of the author. So we shouldn't be overly critical of trying something new, different and dynamic, but we need to ensure that if we're doing that, everything balances still and everything gives the narrative that we want, where this fashionista dynamic attractiveness that's in the picture is counterpoised too much with this heavy shadow here, which gives rise to the feeling of muscularity within the arm, which maybe isn't inferred by the rest of the picture, and the upward view under the nose, which for me is, this is a rule I very, very, very rarely break, because it's just not the best and most flattering angle for subjects, or for human subjects. Right, I like the fact that there's simplicity of tone, simplicity of colour palette. It's all very neutral. I like the fact that the lines of everything flow very well. There's good light in there's good lighting shape, and there's lovely light in the ocular cavity. Again, as I've mentioned on previous images, watch the difference in tone between hands and face, because all it does is highlight the amount of makeup on the face. My main issue with the image is an incongruity. There's an incongruity between pose, action, outfit, physical appearance within the face. It doesn't look as though she's doing something real and natural. It looks as though she's been asked to pull her hands through her hair. So because it's not something that adds to the story and it isn't backed up by the styling of the image or the pose of the image, it leaves us as viewers wondering why. And when we wonder why, then it weakens the image. Also watch the areas of the image nearest to brighter light sources don't bleed out, unless it's a feeling, a mood and a consistency done throughout the picture. Because it's just that forearm to camera right that appears to bleed out and burn out, it looks more like an error than an intention. Right, it's a very good comparison between this image and the previous image. There's not an awful lot of difference between either of them in the ability and the style of lighting. But look at what a huge difference the other tiny tweaks to the picture make. Bringing shoulders flat onto the camera for a young lady make her look as broad as she can be at the time of capture, where turning the shoulder away gives a better, more svelte profile to the picture. The inclination of the head works much better. The soft diagonal dynamic of the composition gives a stronger yet subtler feeling compared to the cacophony of angle going on here. The expression is far more pleasing and less incongruous in the second image. Overall, this becomes so much greater for its simplicity and its nod to simple styling. What happens now is the truncation of the palette works really well, where everything works in harmony. And because it's simpler and feels easier, the echo of an easier, more elegant pose, an easier, more elegant facial expression, all add up little by little to make that a far more polished picture than the previous one. The flow of the hair is beautiful, and the dynamicism, that sort of almost James Dean-esque flying jacket type feel of the picture works really, really well. And many people would be stoked to be able to produce this level of image. However, I know that the author is excelling or trying to excel and push themselves into different boundaries. The George Hurrell-esque mood to the lighting, that sort of vintage Hollywood lighting, works really well and is completed well. Couple of issues that we need to look at because they are quite serious. The first one is this highlight point on the Rembrandt light area on the cheek. The depth of the shadow is quite vicious. So that's again something to consider. The lack of light in the ocular cavity in many images would be a huge problem. But here isn't so much so because of the style of the image, that sort of vintage Hollywoody look. The catchlight added into the eye causes an issue, and the reason it causes an issue is because it lies. It's not the fact that a catchlight has had to be put in, it's the fact that that catchlight shows a softness and a halation of itself that is belied and not congruous to the swift change in delineation line from shadow to highlight that we see here in depth of shadow. It doesn't feel right. The main idea of the picture works really well, and I'd like to see this as a monochromatic conversion. One of the issues that we've got is we've got a gradation here in light that is counter to the direction of light striking the subject. And this for me feels like it's an idea that the authors wanted to try, but without giving consideration to the features of the subject, because this young lady's face is of the wrong shape to broad light. She has a squarer jaw, and broad lighting in this instance has made her look wider than she deserves to look and than she actually is. So this is where lighting by the numbers or trying something with the next person that comes in front of your camera, if that trial doesn't suit the person, it weakens the image. And never forget, nobody comes in and says, hey, can you make me look short, fat and dumpy with a big nose? I think it's a great look, it's just not catching on. Everybody wants to look better the best representation that they possibly can of themselves. And this is just the wrong lighting pattern for the dynamic and shape of this face. And that's something that really needs to be thought about. You can see again it's the same subject, but because we're not broad lighting anymore, the light suits her face much better. The simplicity of the pose, the simplicity of the styling, the beautiful, simple old master muslin works really well with the style of the dress, the style of the pose. It's very vintage flapper and works beautifully for what we're trying to do. It's a sort of timeless image. Be very careful when composing that there isn't too little negative space or too little space to breathe before the subject hits the edge of the frame. It's a lovely use of intersections, golden intersections within the picture. The strong crease brings our eye into where we want it to be, so compositionally that's well used, and the palette used is beautiful. Again, watch for the intensity of accent light, because that accent light almost steals specularity from any other part of the picture. And what we want to be looking at in every portrait of somebody is into the critical areas that are most important, which is the mask of the face. This aggressive accent spills over here and almost robs us of the three-dimensionality that shadow gives us. Losing that spill of accent on the face would also narrow the facial features down, being far, far more flattering. The same on the back of the arm, because it just widens the flesh parts of the image. And again, it takes what could have been a great picture and reduces it down to the level of good. Now, this sounds as though I'm being really harsh, but to be the best that we can be, there's no point in me saying, wow, this is great, this is wonderful, because that's not going to improve the photography or the photographer. And it's only the negatives that we tend to point out, because we want that photographer to take on board the areas that need thinking about, so we can make them better photographers overall. Right, first off, I like the dynamic difference within the quirkiness of the pose. I like the profile. It's well lit, it works well, the separation is good, the colour palette works. Again, we need to look at maybe flagging light off in areas that are not as important as others, as is the change in the contrast in light here. Again, I like the monochromatic feel to the picture. It's not huge swathes of colour, but this might work really well, not just being monochromatic in olive, drabs, greens and flesh tones, but actually in a true black and white. The key light, if we imagine there's a client's head, client's shoulders, the key light is light in this way at the moment, but if it came round to this area and lit back, we'd still get the profile lighting, but we'd also get a degree of specularity in a blade of light that would have added greater dynamicism and a higher point of contrast that would have definitely drawn the eye in there. It's a lovely, fresh, modern idea, counterpoised with a beautiful old master feel. Again, just watch about untidy hairs, even in a guy that's drawing our eye away from things. Watch out for creases in clothes. We are really looking for perfection. The little bit of light bounced back in here to the back of the arm, in this case works well in broadening and strengthening the arm. In a gent, that works great, where we don't necessarily want that in a lady, as pointed out previously. So this is where light, one size does not fit all. You know, we can't light by the numbers. We have to first think of what's the subject, what does the subject want, what's the narrative of the picture, and can I tie in all those elements successfully to give me what I want to create as an artist and what the client wants for themselves. And that brings us to the end of our demonstration of the critique. With all critiques in our mentoring, we try to be positive. It's not our intention to drag anybody down, but as I've said, it's about pointing out errors so errors can be considered, and if that consideration needs a change, can be changed. All things add to adding multiple strings to the photographer's bow. The greater our knowledge, the greater we can decide how things should be. The more time, thoughts and ideas we put into how things should be, the greater the impact we have within our pictures. And to me, it's very important to be multifaceted within our skill. As I say, it's never the intention to be hurtful, rude or overcritical. The aim is to ensure that people see that some of the decisions that they take have weakened the overall strength of the picture, because as photographers striving to be the best we can and to give the very best to those that sit for us, it's important that we understand the alternatives and we understand the impact that our decisions have on the way that an image is going to look and the narrative that's being told within that image and the impact that that image has and how that reflects from what the client wants and the client wants to see and the client wants to feel. People that have been on Mentor Me now, and we have some people that have been with us 13 years, right from the beginning. The vast majority of the successful Mentor Me's have been with us between 5 and maybe 8 years now. And they say that it's the critique that they value the most, and not just having their own images critiqued, but listening to the critique of the fellow mentees, because every critique listened to is valuable, even if it's not your picture, because it strengthens, broadens and gives greater impact and understanding to how you think as an artist, how you see composition, how you see colour, tone, lighting skills, lighting patterns, the sensitivity of light, and how all of those points gel together to make a narrative rich story that's well executed. And that's that execution balanced with the narrative, balanced with sympathetic posing and lighting, that gives a picture its power and its strength. And I'm never satisfied with anything that I shoot. I always believe that it can be taken to yet another level by being looked at critically and giving positive critique back, so we can develop our eye, develop our skills, develop our narrative and our understanding, and develop our visual acuity to match the things that the client needs and the things that the client wants. So that's a fair example of how a critique would go. And then being able to look back upon those thoughts and instructions expands the artist's understanding and expands the tools that that artist will have at their fingertips going forward to give themselves all the success they need and all the abilities that are necessary to make sure that everything is a big tick and a success.
So there you have it. You've seen the aspects that we have in the day. You've watched a critique. You've been into the camera room. You've had the benefit of being able to quantify and clarify your thoughts of where you want to go. So all that's left to do now is decide whether virtual education with T McGillicuddy is the right way to go for you. Follow the links, have a look at the levels and the packages that we do, and hopefully you'll allow us to guide you to the position of success that you want to be in. I have no doubt we can help you get there. Let's do this together and let's achieve the things that you've only ever dreamed of.